All right. Welcome to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson today, joined by Tim, the Freedom Marion O'Connor.
I'm here, Kevin. How are you, brother?
Living the dream. How are you, Tim?
I'm hanging in there, man. Got
Yeah.
some big news, but I want to share it on the radio. Like I want, because there's people all over the state, even out your way, that enjoy the sport of high school wrestling that
No,
are
I was
are
gonna say you're
familiar with me. So I got to give a shout out to my kid,
your
but I
son.
want
Yeah.
to do it for
No,
the
it's
show.
exciting stuff. Yeah, we'll do that on the radio show. Patricia, you made it.
In the house,
All
nice.
right. On YouTube. All right. Um yeah, so we got a couple things coming up. We got the New York State elder parole bill, which
Yeah,
I called New York State to release jail geriatrics because it's just too good of an alliteration to turn down.
it's a
Um,
great alliteration.
the FDA doubling down on their pandemic management skills.
Is that what we call it? Because you're
Yeah,
right. Like that's what they're doing.
yep. It's just they're from the government and they're here to help.
That's all they can do, man, is help.
Yep.
Define help.
Did
That's
you
all
did
I'll
you see
say.
that Department of Education person talking about that? Who's quoting Reagan at like unironically being like, yeah, no, but like Ronald Reagan said, we're from the government and we're here to help, and
Oh yeah, I mean,
just totally whiffing on the point of of why Ronald Reagan said that. Forgot the
look,
first part of that quote that the most terrifying words in the English language are.
we're from the government and we're here to help. Yeah, I caught that. I can't remember the guy's name. God, it was uh, par for the course, honestly, you know?
Yeah,
It's like a little dose of reality here in
so
bizarro world, I guess.
that's what you get every once in a while. But that was an interesting one. And is Cardona, Education Secretary.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
big
uh,
Reagan fan, I'm sure.
yeah.
Overall,
Anyway, so talk about that, and then we're gonna talk about our guy George Santos. Um,
libertarian hero. Look, I got a message for the GOP on this guy. Like, it's got to be for the show, though. They
yeah,
got
no,
they
we'll
got
talk
it
about
here.
that. We'll talk about that. So we're gonna talk about all that stuff, folks. And Shelly, thanks for joining us too. Pandemic mismanagement skills from our witness. Yeah, that's part of it. So we're gonna spend a segment on that. Um,
Shelly's in the house on time. That's crazy. That's crazy. We don't have to see I'm late from Shelly today.
congrats, congrats on making it on time, Shelly. All right, so we're gonna get started in 5, 4, 3.
Now, an hour of clarity for exhausted people of our nation mired in toxic partisanship. Left versus right, us versus them. While we pay to keep our politicians fighting, how do we, the people, rise up and solve the great challenges of our time? We do it by embracing freedom and liberty. There may be no such thing as a free lunch, but this hour is as close as it gets. Welcome to A Free Solution.
Welcome to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson today, joined by Tim, the Freedom Marion O'Connor.
Hey, I'm here, Kevin. It's going to be an exciting night. We have a bunch of great news. We have a controversial, like one of the subjects we want to talk about. I feel like maybe slightly controversial to our audience. A couple of them. We're going to kind of be, you know, cutting those libertarian edges. But one of the first things I really want to do, Kevin, is my young man, my youngest kid, my son, Tiny Tim. He's like 6 foot tall. Like he's a big dude. Um, hit a milestone this weekend that's really, really hard to do in varsity sports, and especially the sport of wrestling. But my young man has managed to string together, and this is through the COVID pandemic. Like he got zero wins the year of the COVID pandemic, 2021, 2020, excuse me.
Yeah.
And so he achieved 150 wins, and that's early in the season. Like he's on track for maybe, who knows, 180, 190. It
That's
puts
awesome.
some really big numbers in sight. I'm very proud of him. He's been very dedicated. Like I say, I know there's a little doubt in my voice, but he has a love affair, an on-off love affair with wrestling. but he's a skilled and talented young man. He works really hard, and I'm very proud of him, Kevin. And I know wrestling's big out your way. We have some friends out that way, so I thought maybe we'd get that on the air, you know?
Yeah, no, that's cool, man. That's awesome to hear your son's kicking butt, and I know folks listening on WYSL, you can't see Tim's just like beaming right. It's just like, man, so proud of his son. That's awesome.
No,
So
it's great. It's great. Just his dedication over the years. He started wrestling when he was 6 years old. He used to have. We've had so much fun going to wrestling tournaments, meeting people from all over the state, um, all over the country, really. And guys, it's just great if you've got a little kid and you want to teach them to be confident in themselves and to teach them the limits of their physical ability and just that test. And it's an old martial art. It's very solid, and it's great to see the controlled violence. Like, I don't like people punching each other. I don't like boxing, right? I don't mind MMA, but when it gets down to it, if you learn the sport, wrestling is really, really, really exciting, passionate, and it goes back to the birth of civilization. You know, the ancient Greeks, instead of killing each other, decided to come up with the Olympics. And one of their biggest sports was, in fact, wrestling. So,
yeah,
Plato, Aristotle, they all have quotes about it. Wrestlers are great.
right on. That's awesome. So yeah, congratulations to your son on that. That's great. And shout out, folks, everyone who's listening. Shelly, Ryan Bedford on Facebook, Trisha on YouTube. Thanks everyone listening online. So again, folks, if you're listening on WYSL, we do usually do this Tuesday evenings at 9:00, and we will we'll do a live show. We'll get some Facebook comments and YouTube comments. You can participate in the show. So if you're listening on WYSL, you're wondering, listening to this sometimes where those are coming from, we're shouting out those folks who are listening to the live version. Anyway, we should dive into some of our topics, Tim.
Yeah, I think the first one we want to talk about is New York State and a compassionate release kind of program where I think it's going to be a little controversial. Like, these guys are criminals, Kevin, and they committed some egregious stuff. It might as well. They've been sentenced for long, keep them in there. What do you think?
Yeah, so let's talk about what the bill is, and then we'll talk about the controversy around it. And it's definitely generated some conversation on in the Rochester area. Sandra Dorley, the DA, took a stand against the elder parole bill, and I had some good discussions on my Twitter feed around it. But so what it does is New York State already has like some like medical parole type of stuff out there, right? So like that's not this, like that's kind of a different thing where like if you are terminally ill, you can ask for parole to be released. That's not what this does. What this does is says if you are 55 years and older, you have served at least 15 years of your sentence, you get a guaranteed parole hearing. And if you don't get paroled, you are eligible for another automatic parole hearing 2 years after that one, right? Mm-hmm. So to be clear, what this doesn't do, and I've kind of heard this in replies to my tweets or in seen this elsewhere in discussion around this, is what this doesn't do is automatically release people at 55. That's not what this bill does. I think there's some misconception that like, oh, like, are you going to release like a, someone who's committed dozens of rapes and dozens of murders? Well, no, not necessarily. They get a parole hearing, and the parole board can still say, nope, we're not going to let this person out, right? So yeah, and that's like, and again, this isn't making an argument either way. I just want to like set up what this actually does versus what it doesn't do, because I think people kind of jumped in with the perception that all these folks are going to be released. New York State is not the first state to do this. There are other states like South Carolina and Mississippi, and others who have also done the same thing. And the reason why they're doing it is because people who like geriatric prisoners, like the older prisoners, are expensive. So that's the big reason why they're doing it for money. Not to be cynical about it, but like that's what it is. Is that medical care starts getting expensive. If you have like a 70-year-old with cancer in prison, it's a lot more expensive to take care of that person than it is to take care of someone who is, 20 with no like health needs. And and I'll read this comment from Patricia on YouTube too, who says, a prisoner has told me many of our prisons need elder care wings, especially in retirement areas. She said also many are in prison for selling their scripts to survive. Like, yeah, it's a thing that can happen. People can go to jail for maybe some crimes that we can discuss later, but it is a thing, right? In New York State, like, had a report a few years ago about their aging prison populations, now up to like 11%, I think was what I looked at, are over 55 years old. So it's a big and growing chunk of the prison population, especially as you have like some of these longer sentences pile up over time, right? And so again, what New York State is doing is some folks are going to frame this as a compassionate thing, which we'll talk about that too, but honestly, it's probably mostly about the money. And like the past reports kind of have emphasized the cost of this. And in terms of like weighing the downside, there's a good chunk of evidence to suggest that after like 45, the recidivism rates start dropping. So that those two things combined. But recidivism rate, for those folks who don't know, is it's people going back to jail after being released, right? So if they go out, they get released from jail, are they going to go out and commit another crime? Because that's the worry, right? And that's the case that Sandra Dorley, as a DA in Monroe County, made, is that here are people who are older who went out and committed other crimes after they were released from jail. Therefore, we should not do this program. All right. So Tim, I've laid out like I think the basics around this before I jump into like any actual arguments about it. What do you think, Tim?
Well, arguably, like I can speak from personal experience. I have a friend whose sister was murdered when we were all young. Like a guy stabbed her in the local parking garage, and he, even with his homicide charges, I can't remember, second degree murder or first degree murder, something like that. He regularly comes up for parole. Now, I'll be honest. I think according to my memory, at least he's been up 6 or 7 times already, and he's been remanded to jail each time. So now he's getting towards this 55 years old. I wonder if that's going to add. I think people would rightfully be a little bit concerned about now, with a new law enhancing the opportunity for parole. Is that going to encourage a parole board to release a guy who is a violent felon that committed an atrocity, So,
and past experience, again, by which I mean like other states who have done this, the answer is no. Like basically very, very, very few people have actually gotten released from these programs in other states, for better or worse, right? Like, again, I'm not making an argument either way with that. It's just that those other states, when things came up, they didn't, they haven't released many folks. Like we're talking like a couple dozen folks out of like hundreds of prisoners who are eligible for this program in other states. And Ryan Bev said, let's hold the board accountable when inmates come due, and there shouldn't be a problem. And that's, so again, what happens with a lot of parole hearings is like there's opportunities for people in the community and victims to like kind of weigh in a sense, and be present for some of these hearings. When they're making a decision, then that's part of what happens. And so that's the big argument. So there's the, if this person is released, are they going to be a danger to the community? And two is, if they committed a serious enough crime, why should they ever get out? Right. And so those are the two big arguments again. So I'll tackle the one that like it's sort of hard though, but like the one that like, hey, if someone committed a really, really ugly crime at 22, can they be a fundamentally different person 34 years later? Right.
I'm going to go with yes, but that does not preclude me from offering a very sympathetic voice to people, to the families of victims of those people. So that's the part where it gets confusing. I want to let you talk but I do have another one where I think both you and I'll just be like, yeah, well, of course. But go ahead,
Yeah,
Kevin.
but so to me, it's like it kind of depends. And there, I need to a lot of the states, and I gotta check to see which ones are restricted in New York. A lot of times there are restrictions on what crimes are eligible for like this type of thing. And I got, as far as I'm aware, New York State doesn't have restrictions on that, but I need to double check that. But again, to me, this is just an opportunity for parole. There's some people who may have committed a stupid, ugly crime at 20. They may have killed someone. And again, they've spent 35 years in jail, right? 35 years over a stupid decision that they made that they know was dumb, that they regret, that they have given essentially their entire life for, like their entire adult life. Should they be released? Yeah, maybe, both from a financial point of view, it'd be expensive to take care of them, and also from a safety point of view, they're probably not likely to reoffend, and then from a they've been punished enough point of view. And I know the victims of the family may feel that there's no such thing as being punished enough, but we have a society where like we do limit what level of punishment the state gives out for crime. So we don't allow victims to punish directly the people who have hurt them for good reasons.
Yeah. I did see something, and I read a couple of them, so I may be confusing it, but that there are certain crimes that, like, if someone has been sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, that is an exception to this. Like, you're not going to get a parole hearing automatically or ever. They're going to respect the judge's ruling there, and that's going to be the end of it. So I get where you're coming from. I am very willing to lend a sympathetic ear to the families of victims of violent crimes. But to take it in a different direction, like there are people in jail that have been in jail for decades for carrying heavy weights of marijuana or
Yeah.
cocaine or stuff like that. And honestly, I don't even want them in jail anymore. Like, I'm sorry to the conservative base that thinks that they've done something here. I'm not sure that that's true. And I think that those people should be already released, but automatically up for parole hearings.
Yeah, no, especially those folks, like the folks who have, like, again, committed these, in some cases, like victimless crimes. And now Ryan Bedford says no jail time for victimless crimes. Yeah,
He's a
100%.
wordsmith.
Yeah, like those folks like that, I think we could definitely 100% agree on. Like the folks who are in jail for that, like in an ideal world, like Governor Hochul, or if she doesn't do it, Governor Larry Sharp or something, they pardon them immediately, and like they're just out of jail. That would be great. But at the very least, for people who have maybe committed serious but not especially violent crimes, that should be a no-brainer. I don't know why anyone would disagree with that.
Yeah, we're here to kind of push the dime on that. We want people to understand that, and Ryan did very well there, that victimless crimes are a majority of people that are serving time in prison. Okay, that there is.
Well, I'll correct. They're not actually. Most people
really?
serving
I'm
time in
sorry.
prison. No, like I used to think that too. But I looked it up. Most people serving time in prison are there for violent crimes, right?
Good, good,
Right.
man.
And
That makes me
so,
happy.
then it just becomes a matter of like, okay, someone's serving time for a violent crime. That might be like, they got in a fight, or they seriously injured someone. And again, like I come back to like, okay, if someone's serving 20 years because like they seriously injured someone because they're, stupid at and usually it doesn't happen like older than like 30 years old. Like most of the crime is committed by young people. Like it's not, and I'm not trying to like sound discriminatory, but like that's what it is. Like younger people have less impulse control, and therefore tend to commit a disproportionate number of crimes. And so, yeah, like someone serving decades in prison for something like that, like I'm sort of sympathetic to like, okay, they probably have matured enough to gain impulse control and they regret their actions, and it might be prudent to release them to go and like be on their own and live their own life and not be on the system, as
Yeah,
not be paid for by taxpayers as much. I mean, some of them are going to end up on like Medicaid and whatever, but
sure. But that's cheaper than keeping them in jail, probably.
yeah, it is. I mean, and from the state's point of view, again, the state, like the bill, which is, I'll post a link to the bill. It gives a lot of these like moral reasons to do it, and like people of color are the most likely to be victims of this, and like this is like about compassion and blah blah blah. It's about money. Like it's like again, and like the libertarian me is like, yeah, okay, money, that makes sense, but the reason why is it's expensive to take care of older people in prison, and if they get out and can't support themselves, then they can get on Medicaid, and that's on the Fed's dime. So it's sort of on the state's dime, but like really, it's on the Fed's dime.
Yeah,
Medicaid and Medicare.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The federal government's going to pay for it. It's not us paying for it. We're saving money.
We get to signal our virtue and save money at the same time. It's actually a pretty fancy strategy for our government. Really, I don't hate it.
Yeah,
and I do. Like I said, I think that where it will be controversial, you and I agree, is that a violent felon that's committed an atrocity is now going to get an automatic parole. That doesn't mean they're going to get automatically paroled. They're going to get an automatic parole hearing. I can see where people are going to be upset about that.
Yeah, I see where people are upset, and I understand the empathy thing, and I don't want to. Facebook user, the Fed's dime is our taxes. Yeah, I know.
It's true.
We're in on the joke. But and I know you are too. But so yeah, it's where's it going with this? I got distracted by that comment. No, I am empathetic to folks who are like, hey, this person hurt me. They hurt my family. They took away, my brother, my son, my daughter, whatever it is, and ended their life in an awful fashion. If they had their way, that person would probably be dead. And like I get that, and you have to balance that against, okay, how do we build a system that is cost effective, and do we want a jail system that merely punishes? Like, is the purpose of jail to keep violent people away from the rest of society? Is the purpose of jail to punish people, or is it to correct people to get them back into, like, reintegrate them into society again? Or is it all three? And it might be all three. But I would love to discuss that, but Tim, we're running up on break. So WYSL audience, if you want to hear that discussion, you're going to have to subscribe to our podcast. Go find us on Spotify or whatever. We're going to talk about that during the break. Thanks again for joining us here on A Free Solution. We're going to be back in just a few minutes. Talk to you soon. All right.
That time flew there, Kevin. Holy cow. That I thought, honestly, we weren't, I don't know. I can't believe how fast that segment went, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's a quick segment. There's a lot to talk about. We could probably spend an entire episode on this thing if we wanted, but let me get to a couple comments, and then I do want to ask that I want you to answer that question about like the prison system. But a couple comments is John Thuman on YouTube says Larry Sharp's plan for release was to empower the guards to recommend. Yeah, and that can and should be part of it. Again, Larry was / is, I don't know what he's doing next, but like has his father was a corrections officer, and he went and talked to a lot of COs all around the state. Like I remember he was out in Auburn talking to folks out that way, and we talked to him about like, because a lot of correction officers, like, they do view the system as potentially rehabilitative, right? Again, there are some folks who are violent. If you release them, they're gonna go out and hurt people, right? Like, I get that. That is part of it. But there are other folks who they got lost, they got caught up in some dumb stuff, and if given a new opportunity and skills, and they're separated from the people who got them mixed up in bad things, are going to go out, be released, and be successful, right? And so here, talk to a lot of like corrections officers. Like some are like, I'm sure are cynical and like don't like, and I've talked to some of those folks like that too. But like some are like, they're like, hey, like what should happen is that they get out and they, are able to lead a normal life and not hurt anyone else. That's the goal.
That's the biggest goal for sure.
Yeah. And again,
I mean,
Not. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, but it is past violent behavior is a predictor of future violent behavior. But I get the point of there's been this extended period of incarceration, right? So to circle around to your question of, and I've wrestled with this question: is the goal of the prison to punish or to rehabilitate? Like, what would be the most appropriate way? And I've read, and Kevin, I'll be honest with you, I never got to a conclusion, but I read studies that I found controversial, where like, but also not controversial, made me think. Okay, like in Sweden, I think they have a little different kind of reprogramming technique where it's more like the goal of incarceration is rehabilitation. Now, I
Yeah.
don't know if that deals with, I don't know how they deal with violent crimes, but I was kind of like
No,
always,
it's them too. Like that guy who like shot up a camp with like 60 people. Like he's only getting like it's like 15 years in jail or something. It's like the longest sentence they've ever had.
yeah, see, so like that feels, as an American and like an emotional reactor, just like every other American, that doesn't feel like enough,
Yeah.
you know?
Is that like I mean, where the United States, we've taken the total opposite view. Like we have one of the biggest prison populations in the world, like per capita. And the reason why is because of that, because of like that, what you said there. And again, I'm not even necessarily saying it's wrong, or incorrect rather. I'm saying that like the American philosophy behind justice is if we take violent people and remove them from society for a very long time, and we just keep doing that over and over again, every time we find violent people, remove them from society, keep them locked up for decades and decades until, you know, at least again, they're older, so they're less likely to be violent. That's like an explicit part of the American justice system. Then
Yeah,
like society will be safer and crime will be lower. And that is Joe Biden's like philosophy.
absolutely.
Like his tough on crime philosophy is that, right? And so that's kind of what we're talking about here is he thought like, like the gang members, the people who are violent, the people who have committed multiple violent crimes, like we need to separate them. Like, and who cares? We don't need to be compassionate to them. We need to be compassionate to their victims and potential victims and keep them
Yeah.
separated. And even if that's expensive, it is cheaper than and more just than the loss of life and the damage that they would do on the outside. So that's again, that is Joe Biden's tough on crime like philosophy in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Um, but the consequence of that is that some people are locked up for an extremely long time, possibly for much longer than they really need to be. And, they may be locked up for decades longer than when they're likely to go out and commit another violent crime. And that's like, again, the European model is like work towards rehabilitation, work towards getting people out and productive in society again. That ought to be the goal because some people in their minds are turning to crime out of desperation, and that's why they're
Yeah.
they're lying, they're stealing, they're joining gangs, they because they're fearful, because they have no money, and like the conditions that create crime are solvable things both in communities and within the correction system itself. And we'll get to this comment from Ryan. It says, violent
Yeah,
crime
that's good.
aside, I'd honestly been low enough to think about committing a crime to get 3 meals and a roof. How many are in a worse place than I've been? And there are a lot of people who will go and do stuff like that. That is a legitimate thing. It's like, well, I'm familiar with, they'll probably go to maybe county jail for a couple months. And, if they do that during the winter, that's
Yeah, look,
as
Ryan.
violent of a place it is, like they feel like they can handle it. That's like a thing that some people do.
Yeah, Ryan's a talented dude, Kevin, like you and like myself. Like he gets work done. And look, I get where he's coming from. We've all been at that moment of, not all of us probably, but I've certainly been very close to that as well, Ryan. Where things are not, they're just not going my way. And many, many years ago, I worked hard to change those circumstances, but I could see it again in the future. Like the economy is kind of a disaster. Like it's undersung just how bad the economy is for the middle class right now. So, yeah, man, I get it. So, yeah, also there's got to be a nature of forgiveness, and I don't know, like when it gets into violent crimes, or I'm less comfortable, but when we get into major frauds or you know guilt by association crimes where you're part of a conspiracy or some part of a black market gang, and you all get kind of looped in, I think there would be room to really
Yeah.
get a lot of people out of prison that don't deserve to be there.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, but like, because to me, like that's the low hanging fruit stuff. Like that stuff, like the victimless crimes. I mean, some people call drug crimes like not victimless crimes, but like I generally think like we are way too carceral about those. But really, again, as I said, like I used to talk about like all the people in prison for drugs and everything, but like I started doing more research. Like, no, it's really not it. A lot of people are in jail because they were violent, and so that's the tougher question. If libertarians want to talk about like what do we do about like all these about our high jail population, like saying that we want to end the war on drugs is great. That's a big step in the right direction. It's not going to make that big of a dent as people think it is, though. Unfortunately, it's
I did some of that research too, and yes, it would be a huge impact. Eliminating black markets would also have a huge impact on the need for violent crime to enforce your black market.
I mean, look at the level of violent crime before, during, and after alcohol prohibition. Like the level of violent crime, just absolutely wild. How much violent crime spiked during prohibition when you had those black markets for highly in demand product like alcohol, and then how much it dipped immediately afterwards. Like just right as soon as you like eliminated those black markets and eliminated all those like ugly incentives to like enforce your own will, enforce your own contracts, crime dropped. And then when did it spike again? When we started ramping up the war on drugs in the 60s. Richard Nixon's war on drugs, he started ramping it up, and
the
then
government
violent crime
is in the
spiked.
business. Yeah, the government's in the business of misinterpreting statistics to benefit themselves. I swear to God, that's like 50% of their market. So
yeah. No, but yeah, to your point though, like I think the way I said this, I'm not giving enough credit to how ending the war on drugs would also impact violent crime. So that's
right.
That's a really it's a good point, and we should say that because if we ended the war on drugs like really ended it, violence would probably drop quite a bit too, and you'd have less people in jail. Yeah, you'd have less people in jail for violence. So, and I don't know. I'm trying. I felt like I was going to make another point about this, but I don't know what it was. I was gonna. Yeah, I won't even get into it. But I was going to talk more about the the recidivism rate as people get older. Again, whether or not that's a good reason, but
that's okay. I think you covered it very well in the show. I do think that intellectually, your point is well taken. Emotionally, it's hard to accept it. I think you know what I mean.
Get it. No, I get it. It's a tough argument to make, and I generally fall on the side. This is a good idea from my financial perspective. It's a good idea. It's an okay idea from a public safety perspective, and that there are some people who may have committed violent acts in their 20s that, I don't think deserve to be punished their entire life. And a parole board will determine that. And there are some people who like they've committed crimes so serious, so ugly that like they will spend the rest of their life in jail. No one will ever release them. And again, the important thing to know with this law in particular is that it is not guaranteed they will get out.
Right. That's a good point. This is a great philosophical point. I don't know how. I know we got to get back into the show, but like, will digital currency take care more government control take care of black market problems? I don't think so. I think we'll do the opposite.
That's certainly what the government is hoping.
Right.
I mean, they're gonna watch all your Venmo transactions. Ooh, Kevin, someone gave you $86. Was it for drugs? No, it was for a volleyball league, but like, thanks for showing up at my house and killing my dog.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was for drugs.
Yes. It was. What? None of your business.
Yeah. Can I deduct the expense off my taxes? Look,
you cannot. Tim, you must pay taxes on the proceeds from illegal activity. You cross the IRS.
I know. There's a guy in Connecticut. I heard it when I was working there last year. He was having all sorts of problems. Like he got not convicted. He got proven. He somehow got out of his drug charges, but the IRS then came after him. for his illicit
Tax evasion.
profit.
I mean, that's what the Al Capone got on, wasn't it? It was tax
Yeah,
evasion. He wasn't paying taxes on the alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And we get him on all the violence. It's just
Yeah, all the violence he did, but
pay Uncle Sam.
that's pretty serious. Like that's legit.
I'd say yeah, he didn't pay his protection money. Is what it was. You know. It's just,
oh, it's yeah. And you know, it's like people don't handle it well when you say the government is like an organized crime syndicate, and yet everything they do mirrors how the mob built up its popularity. And then, I mean, arguably the mob saw that kind of power and they went into politics, right? So they just took.
I mean, that's
next
I
level.
mean, like it's literally how government started. It started as like protection money. Hey, listen, we're gonna steal some of your stuff, but if you let us steal some of your stuff, we'll protect you from other people stealing more of your stuff.
Yeah, well,
that's the whole deal.
Model.
Yeah. So someone out in Sumeria thought that was a great thing, and we just ran with it.
Yep.
Thanks, y'all.
Fair enough.
All right, we probably should get back to the show. We've been going on like I don't know, almost 15 minutes. We've done a full like mid-show segment.
Time is flying tonight. I don't understand. It's awesome.
All right, we'll go back in 10 seconds. Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Willis here today, joined by Tim the Freedom Variant O'Connor.
I am here, Kevin. What should we have a plethora of things to talk about. What's next on the agenda for us tonight?
So the next thing I think we're going to talk about, and folks listening on WYSL, we just did a whole 13-minute segment on like continuing talking about prisons and rehabilitation versus punishment versus separation and a whole bunch of stuff. So again, make sure you subscribe to our podcast. Go find us on Spotify. We're trying to build up our subscribers over there, and also talked about like the nature of government and organized crime too, all that stuff. But going on to this segment, I think we're going to talk about the FDA, talk about them doubling down on pandemic incompetence. So Tim, do you want to talk about that one?
Sure. Let's talk about the FDA wanting to approve lab tests that test for sickness. And the end result of what's going to happen with that is that, first of all, we saw early on that people developed rapid tests for COVID that could have been used effectively, efficiently, and quickly to help people self-isolate and perhaps slow the spread faster, get us back to work sooner. And look, the whole government response was bad, but this area in particular of
just
basically waiting until their preferred vendor comes out with the test that they want, when we had people making tests in their garages that could have mass produced them. And garages, a small lab
small legitimate labs, right?
Legitimate labs, like not a real garage thing. It's a small legitimate lab with professionals in there who were ready, willing, and able to mobilize to take on this COVID thing. And the FDA, well, they crapped all over them, really. You know, the government crapped all over them, slowed down the process of getting effective testing. And look, it was a major disappointment.
So like you're underselling the level of like stupidity and deadliness that emerged from like just rampant government incompetence at the beginning of the pandemic. Because if you remember what happened, right, was that the FDA, as you said, like they were regulating the tests. They're saying like, no, people, you got to use our tests, right? Other labs had developed like other tests that were effective, that were cheaper, that they could get out to be able to tell like very quickly whether or not someone had COVID. But the FDA told all these labs like, no, you've got to use our tests. And that's what they were using when they're trying to do all these tests in like February and March, early on in the pandemic, when they're trying to figure out like, where is it? Like that was at the time when where is COVID and how fast is it spreading? And like, what do we know about this disease that is popping up here, right? January, February, March. Turns out that test didn't work. The test was broken. It didn't work. And they tried to force everyone to use that one test. And all these other testing companies that had tests that actually did work could not get through the cumbersome and onerous process to get FDA approval to let their tests that actually worked be in use. No, you have to go all this has to go through like our system. So the FDA approved stuff through the CDC systems, all this stuff. They didn't work. And so how many people died because the government was just bumbling around in the early period of pandemic and couldn't figure out what the heck was going on? Who knows? But it's just like it's wild, like, because I think people just forget how utterly stupid and deadly the government response to COVID was in the beginning. Like just so bad. Like, we could have gotten like a better understanding of what was going on and understood it better and like gotten a better handle on it in the beginning. But between that and like and all the other weird stuff that they did early on in the pandemic, Nancy Pelosi telling people not to be racist, go out and celebrate in the streets and go to crowded areas, and then flipping on that, and then the whole mask weirdness thing too. But anyway, so the FDA, Tim, as you started to state, looked at that response and said, hey, you know what we did wrong? We didn't regulate hard enough.
Let's regulate harder. That's their goal right now.
Yeah, we just gotta regulate more. No, they they want to increase their power to regulate tests. Even at like within laboratories that they didn't necessarily claim jurisdiction over in state regulatory apparatus that they didn't necessarily claim control over before. They've imposed like a series of new rules and requirements and approval mechanisms to make this whole thing worse. Again, like, and that was like the whole thing. Like people talk about like the free market couldn't have possibly like responded effectively to the pandemic. The free market did. The free market responded. It was government that was stepping on their own toes and getting in everyone's way to respond effectively to the pandemic in the beginning.
Everything was so politicized back then, and everyone was literally paranoid. And some of it I got, some of it I still kind of understand, especially the early pieces of the pandemic. But when we talk about the free market getting better tests out there faster, that would have allowed a more appropriate response. When I lived in a county where there were zero people with COVID, and we were still locked down, and schools were still closed out of a metric that was called an abundance of caution. I'm like,
Yeah.
Wow. We go back to this, and we professional labs had tests available that would have given us way better information. Look, we had people freaking out about kids walking down the street, and
right. And like, again,
the government gotten out of the way and allowed us to effectively communicate the risk, allowed the free market to take action. My God, it would have been so much better, Kevin.
Yeah, right. And so like on two fronts. One, there's like the letting people evaluate their own risks and to take their own safety precautions, right? So like, I mean, my goodness, they were like chaining off parks and stuff, which they did in the park next to my. They chained off like the tennis courts, like and close up the basketball hoops and everything. Like that was like a thing. Like California was doing that till like December of 2020. It was bonkers. Whereas like as you started to see how people naturally reacted and did stuff and interacted with one another, like you'd start to see like what the actual level of risk was. And part of the knowledge that can be helpful is like the development of these like rapid tests, right? Like, because that was like part of the thing, right? Like we know like the rapid tests aren't like perfect. They never were. However, if like you want to determine whether or not you're sick, and if you're really sick, you probably should have just stayed home. We probably always should stay home if you feel awful. Like I'm okay with that change of culture.
Yeah.
But if you weren't sure and you wanted to take a COVID test, you could have done that. The barrier to doing that was the FDA, and now they want to regulate these tests as medical devices, which requires a much more significant set of regulations to jump through. It's going to be longer, and the next time a pandemic happens, like we're already setting ourselves up for failure again. Because, again, innovative people, as you said, in these small labs will come up and like figure out how to make a test. And yes, they're going to make a buck off of it. I don't care. I'm happy if they make a buck off of providing a useful service to us if they're in the free market, right? And it's legitimate and it works. Great. The FDA, as it turns out, does not hold a good monopoly on what is actually a good and accurate test. They dropped the ball this time. Why should we trust them on this?
Yeah, I can't wait for AOC to come out and take on the FDA on this issue, this somewhat complicated issue. Whereas
Teller is more important than sunscreen, even. Like, hey, listen.
Is it though, Kevin? I mean, is it? Because like imported sunscreen is, far superior to American sunscreen or whatever her argument was. And it was great that she took on the FDA for a lack of freedom and a lack of accountability and a lack of free market stuff for sunscreen. I mean, that was great. But
listen, she was right on that one. Like she's totally right on that. I wish not that sunscreen is trivial. Like it is, like it's important. It's one of those things like sugar subsidies. Yes, like no one thinks about it, but it is an important issue. Or baby formula. It's not important until it's important because the FDA is screwing that up too.
Absolutely.
And just keep applying that logic. Keep applying that same logic. Sunscreen, baby formula, and extend it to how do we make sure we can respond as quickly as possible to a I think I unplugged my camera. Okay. As quickly as possible to a pandemic.
Certainly the free market can allow those things to happen. We can certainly, like that's the thing. We've lost this basic common sense trust in our neighbor to provide us with things that will in fact benefit us. Like that's the concept of the free market, that our neighbor is going to go to work to help us out if they have a specialized skill in dealing with a pandemic. Why wouldn't we trust our neighbor over trusting the government, like, and the bureaucracy and the legions of time that it takes for them to like approve and develop things, like that I don't know. Yeah. The free market is our neighbor, man. You know what I'm saying?
No, it is what it is, right? Like it's, like unfortunately the government is not set up to respond rapidly to these things. And everyone talks about like, that Donald Trump talked about this, Obama talked about this, Biden talks about this. Like, no, next time we are going to be prepared. We have seen what happens. We're going to be ready to step up immediately and do this, except for they won't give up their other political priors in order to make that successful. They won't say, hey, I mean, and Donald Trump to either his credit or, to his detriment, like did that in relation to vaccines. He said, okay, we're going to fast track vaccines because like, we need to get this thing to people. And so that's the emergency use authorization thing, right? That's what he did. The FDA screwed up on the test things. Donald Trump did. One of the things I'll give him credit on is like, well, okay, we're going to do this with vaccines. Now that's different than states requiring it, schools requiring it, jobs requiring it. The goal is to just get this product in people's hands if they wanted to do it.
Sure. Having it available and developed under the guidelines of vaccine, especially I think it was the Johnson one, the Johnson & Johnson one, was a standard vaccine of a diluted virus. Diluted's not the right word, but that to me, we had the science, we had the technology for that to get that out there. Now, I probably would have still chosen not to take that one because of whatever, but I certainly wasn't going to take the mRNA ones. You know what I mean? Like that had no interest for me.
Yeah, well, it's your choice, but there are lots of people who did want that choice, and there are companies who were willing and able to do it.
Right. Absolutely. Right? No, I agree.
So, like, yeah, even without like the government prize for this, with Operation Warp Speed, like the companies were going to do this because people wanted this product. And same with testing too, right? People like wanted a test and they want to see that was accurate. And there were lots and lots of third-party labs who were evaluating these tests too, and saying these ones work, these ones don't work. They had plenty of samples available at the time to like evaluate these tests and get like almost real time, like consumer reports level evaluation of all of these tests that were coming out. Like
Right.
again, the free market responded spectacularly to the pandemic. It was the government that messed up. Again, the free market responded with tests. They responded with hand sanitizer. They responded with mass production, which again, we won't debate mass, but that was what the market thought was needed at the time, right?
And the
Like
free
the point
market
is that
offered. Yeah, the free market
exactly.
offered, and the government refused. Okay, like
Yeah.
the Remington Arms facility up in Ithaca offered to retool to make masks and PPE for medical professionals, and the Governor Cuomo said no and continued to buy stuff from a Chinese porn store toy company, and it was just like ridiculous failure of government. Ridiculous. Not enough's been made about out that one, and I keep trying to bring it up, and people don't
Yeah.
really quite remember what I'm talking about.
But
But it's real.
there's so much weird stuff about the pandemic. It is hard to remember it all. Again, like you're like, oh yeah, like I forgot the FDA dropped the ball on that specific thing. I
Yeah,
totally forgot about the weird like Cuomo mass production stuff, and I
yeah.
almost forgot about the weird poster he put out, which I sort of regret not buying. Like I
Oh
should have
my
I should have
God, man.
bought it in the like it should be in the background of like every show. I should have got one. So someone's selling them somewhere.
We've got to find it because it was so bad. We'll do a whole show just on that poster. He painted it himself, Kevin. That's the beauty of it.
That's ridiculous. All right. Anyway, so we are out of time for this segment. Thanks again for joining us here on A Free Solution. We'll be back for one more segment in just a few. Talk to you soon.
It freaked me out. I thought my connection was going bad. I'm like,
No, I was talking with my hands and like accidentally pulled my my camera. So
that's awesome. You're getting more and more animated. I love it. I love
yeah.
it.
I gotta find that Cuomo poster.
Oh my God, it was so bad.
Oh man. Oh, someone's selling one for $500 on eBay. I'm absolutely not paying that
No,
much for that poster.
no, it was so bad. The sea of tranquility, the mountain of like green snot, like the COVID
Yeah.
mountain or something. It was just,
Yeah, it was supposed to be like a weird like 19th century like political cartoon.
yeah.
And yeah, it just ended up being very bizarre. Yeah, it's a weird sun, Donald Trump or who's sitting on the moon in it. And then they're all sitting at the table doing their
Whatever it is. I
doing
mean,
their press conference. I don't know, but
that guy was so weird, man. Like, look, I'm not happy about how he got ousted. I'm just glad he's gone. And I don't like Hochul better, but it's just like, at least he's gone.
yeah, that is true. He's out of here, but I got it. I got the poster.
Oh my God, there it is. Mask
Love
up.
wins. There's the plane. Winds of fear. Testing. What is going on here? Hospital surge. The Javis Center. Right. Was that the big boat that you brought in?
Yeah.
Yeah, which
No,
didn't
the
end up
Javits
doing
Center
anything.
is a big facility. They also brought in a boat, but you don't see the boat.
Yeah, right.
Trump sent a Navy medical ship, a big, huge. I can't remember the name of it, but they did open up the Javits Center. They got like 12 people in there, and no one went on the boat.
Yeah, it's just and they stayed in the nursing homes. I don't see that on here for some reason.
No, he
I
skips
wonder
that
why.
part.
Yeah, it's
And guys like nursing.
well, it's there. Hospital surge and flex is probably part of that.
Yeah, nursing homes are recovery homes, respite homes. Okay, like
Yeah.
these are. It's not just old people that are there, but sending people to places where obviously old age and other immunocompromised people are recovering who have COVID was insane. It was an insane decision. It was insane. And it was all about the money. And who was that guy that ran for governor that he made big bank off of it because he was a nursing home owner? Anyway, can't remember his name, but somebody will remember it.
Donald
power
Trump
of
on the
belief.
moon. It's subway disinfect. Man, it's weird. Stock market
It's so
opens.
fun.
Follow the facts. Sea of Division, Arizona, Texas, Florida. Sea of Division.
This guy.
I,
This
I,
guy was so bad. That guy was so bad. We better get back to the show, though.
no, we should get back to the show. And, no, I think I want to say is, Ryan, yeah,
He wouldn't.
you can't jab. He says, Ryan on Facebook says, you can't jab me, Kevin Wilson. You know what? I won't.
He won't.
Just because I respect your liberty, sir. You do your thing.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. It was funny though. That was a tense time, man, back then. It was wild.
Yeah. I have never said that vaccine should be required. Never once.
John Thuman said that
And
you
I know Ryan's just teasing me. Just
keep it accurate to the best
Yeah.
of. But the best jabs aren't always 100% accurate. Oh, see what I did there?
The best jabs. I see what you did. But anyway, yeah, you're right. We should go back, and we gonna talk about our man George Santos.
We've got to, bro. We've got to.
George Santos. All right. Ah, man, I drank all my beer too. All right.
Oof.
All right. So we're gonna go back in 5. Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson today, joined by Tim the Freedom Marion O'Connor.
Kevin, as regular viewers and watchers and radio listeners know, one of my big heroes of this last election cycle was George Santos, who crafted a completely this identity that hit all of the metrics. Like, I'm a gay Republican tech financer or tech developer, and amazingly enough, most of it wasn't true. He did a lot of shoddy kind of fundraising, allegedly. But only 6 people have been expelled from the House of Representatives. George Santos was number 6. And guys, frankly, I'm disappointed, and I'm going to start with this. Here's why. Due process has become an issue in our society. Now, George Santos has been convicted of nothing and accused of a lot of things. His fraudulent representation of himself is no different than what Adam Schiff does every single day, what Chuck Schumer has done for decades. Okay, all of these guys are frauds, exaggerators, and liars. So for George Santos to get kicked out of the Senate when Bob Menendez and Adam Schiff are still there, okay, this is a travesty. This is an injustice.
Did you see John Fetterman talking about that?
Oh, John Fetterman did a great job. He could actually be my next hero. Like, he's really kind of taking it. Like, he's a snazzy dresser, which is important. Like, if you're going to be making statements, you need to dress the part. But he's out there going, how can we kick out George Santos when Bob Menendez is still a part of the Senate? And it's a pretty valid point. Like, if we're going to wait for Bob Menendez to get convicted when he just narrowly escaped conviction in the past, like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, listen, if you're going to do that, like if you're going to expel people who are engaged in extremely shady behavior, Bob Menendez kind of seems like he's at the top of the list, right? Like, again, it's someone who wasn't convicted, who hasn't been convicted, only accused of other crimes. The same way that George Santos has. He's been accused of many crimes, including stealing a member's mother's credit card at one point too, to go and buy stuff with it.
Yeah.
Like he's got a very long list of wild accusations around what he's done. And to your point, like among the 6 members who were kicked out of Congress, they were all people who were like actually like convicted of the crimes or were like Confederates. They committed actual treason.
And look, so one point I want to stick my angry finger in people that, and guys, forgive me for this, okay, but the GOP 112 people in the Republican Party voted to oust George Santos. Those same 112 people would never, okay, guys, and this is the problem with the GOP. One of the many problems, because arguably it's complicated, so we can cover all of it, but they would never vote to oust Adam Schiff because Adam Schiff has a lot of money, okay? Or whatever reason, because he's been there for years and they'd make some excuse about his service, but the guy's a liar, a panderer, and look, he's a bad dude. But the system supports the system. So 112 members of the GOP did not stand on principle, the principle of due process, which is huge, and we're losing it in our
Right.
society.
So, well, let me make a counter argument, right? Because I've
Sure.
seen like a few members say the process that they felt was adequate for their own purposes was that they had a House committee investigation into what George Santos had done, and that the threshold for the House expelling one of its members isn't guilty beyond all reasonable doubt. It's just enough for them to feel that their continued presence there sullies the reputation of like Congress and the House of Representatives, that
Ha ha.
they're
Good point.
damaging to the institution. So, Tim, what do you think of that argument?
Arguably, there's probably of the 435 or so, there has been serious allegations and financial misbehavior, flat out lying to the American public, and all of those things should be expellable offenses.
You just like
When
expel all of them.
what's that?
Are you saying expel all of them?
No, but almost all of them have committed an offense at one time or another. Like stealing valor, right, and getting caught. Um,
Right.
Adam Schiff creating false narratives and lying to the American people and his fellow members of the House of Representatives deliberately because of his anti-Trump position. Right. These things are dangerous to truth. They're dangerous to, arguably, I don't like the word democracy anyway, but they're dangerous to the ability of a republic to function effectively. And we do nothing about that. The system repeatedly supports the system over and over again. And George Santos was at least hilarious.
Right. Well, at least, so what usually happens in cases like that is they do censure is what they'll usually use is someone who's making either a fool of themselves or just being brazen in their political lies. They'll censure them and then let voters decide if they want to face reelect that person to Congress, which Congress could have very well done with George Santos, although he's I will say he's in a category of his own in terms of the long list of things that he's accused of.
Sure.
And
Well,
like, but to kind of reinforce your point, like in terms of like lying about, straight up making up stories about his life, Joe Biden has also done this.
he has.
Like famously plagiarized, during his first presidential election, and just tells weird stories that didn't happen all the time. But
All the time. When he
you know,
can
he
even tell stories, Kevin, he's kind of losing that ability right now. It seems like, I don't know if he needs more adrenochrome or what it is, some
oh my
more
goodness,
stem cells, something. But that dude needs some treatments, man. He's losing it.
I gotta go there. But
I know you reel me back off this ledge. I'm mad that they got rid of my
but
man Santos.
yeah. So so in terms of like what should Congress have done for this? Like I'm kind of sympathetic to your argument that maybe this should have just been left to the voters. They could have censured him, and until he's committed of an actual crime. He's been accused of crimes. There's a federal investigation around him, but there have been federal investigations around other members of the House before, and they haven't expelled people other than the folks who were expelled for supporting the Confederacy and the folks who were expelled after they were actually convicted of like bribery.
Well, there's that little bit of principle that I'm standing on here. I'm not really mad that George Santos got kicked out or that George Santos is an imperfect human being. I do want to reiterate that it's hilarious how he got elected and the metrics that he used and the
Oh,
virtues that he used. I think that's
everything about him is funny. Like I am certain that he is going to continue to be funny in some way until
yeah.
he actually goes to jail. Um, and yeah, I mean, right now he's doing like cameos. Like you pay like $200 to get a cameo, Tim. That's
Nice.
he's making an honest buck that way. Just
We should pay
and
him $200 to come on Free Solution.
yeah, there we go. Yeah, drop $200 on that. And it is he threatened to like expose all the other members of Congress for what they were doing too. And I'm like, all right, like he's gonna bring some drama. And if he keeps being entertaining, like we'll probably keep talking about him. But
I hope he does. All right. I hope he has some stuff that's fun to discuss down the road. But I think most of it, Kevin, you and I are already familiar with. We've talked about it on other shows, or it's part of what made us libertarians in the sense that these guys are devoted to a system and we can see through what they are. And the people that are commenting, our friends that watch this show, and the WYSL audience all scores very high on that, as far as I'm concerned. Seeing these people for being somewhat fraudulent, stealing valor, and playing games of popularity to grow their own power, to get reelected, and to grow the power of the government.
And actually, so like that last point is really important, and I'm sort of stealing this argument from a podcast I was listening to right before the show, is the Reason Roundtable one, where the reason why they expelled George Santos for his shenanigans and not all the other folks is that George Santos's political shenanigans were not politically useful.
True, that makes perfect sense, really.
Right, and so like there's a bunch of like the stuff Adam Schiff does, he's still politically useful, like.
Right.
And the stuff that Chuck Schumer does, he's still politically useful. The stuff that Joe Biden does, he's still politically useful. The stuff that George Santos does, it doesn't help other members. Like when he's making like a show of something or lying or whatever, it doesn't benefit their fundraising in any way, not even temporarily. It doesn't rile the base. There's no upside to it. It's all just, man, I don't want to be associated with that guy. He's a mess.
He did a great job of highlighting how they played the game and then got caught, right? Like that whole craft a narrative about yourself that fits the narrative that society wants to see. Like the gay Republican tech entrepreneur. Like people are like, wow, like, wow, that's hot. That is so hot right now. That's what this district needs, is a gay Republican tech entrepreneur. And then it's like, he may not even be gay. He's definitely not a very successful tech entrepreneur. And, whatever. You know what I mean?
He may have lied about a dozen other aspects of his life.
Sure.
May have been misusing campaign funds, all these allegations,
He'll pay everybody back. He's in Congress now. They need to relax. They should have just killed him.
Well, not anymore, Tim.
True. That's true. Now it's
not anymore. So, he... There's so much messiness. This guy, I'm still shocked that he got elected in the first place. It just like because some of the stuff around him was like is already out there. It's like a thing, and just like didn't get reported on. It's no one talked about it, or no one cared. I don't know.
Well, people grab onto the platitudes, I think, which I get, and I think maybe in a sense his service to society will be huge. People will stop grabbing onto the platitudes, like
Tim. Now you're being too
real research before they cast a vote. I don't know. That would be crazy. It certainly didn't happen in Senate District 51, right? Like we did, it just played out along party lines. That's it. So I don't know.
Shelley on YouTube says Santos didn't set off a fire alarm. Just saying.
Did you see that guy kind of entered a plea of I won't do it again? Like not a guilty plea. It's like, hey, I promise not to do anything like this again. And so he didn't get convicted of anything. He didn't admit to anything.
Yeah.
He's going to pay some court costs and some fines of some sorts, but basically his record remains clean.
Yeah,
I still
why not kick him out, right? Like, look at him,
right.
like, disrupting, like, procedures of Congress that, just like the January 6th folks,
Yeah, I was just gonna say, here
and
we go right to insurrectionist. He insurrected the duly process of the bunch of clowns that
yeah, I mean,
go in.
like literally, like you're trying to delay a vote. It's like that's what he was trying to do, and that's not an accusation. Like that's what he was trying to do, and he pretend like, oh, I didn't read the sign. Nonsense. It was right there. He took
Yep.
down the sign and then opened it. He was trying to do it to disrupt the vote, and like again, he's abusing the fire alarm system, which is like I don't know. DC's they Congress exempts themselves from a lot of rules, but I still feel like
Sure.
that's probably a crime, and like that seems like something like you actually might expel someone for. Like I'd be fine with that, honestly. Like, I'm a little bit like mixed on the George Santos thing, but like I don't know, like if you're gonna like set off a fire alarm to like disrupt the vote, like no, like get out of here. Like that's not how we do things here, or at least should do things.
You're still demonstrating a belief in that these people there's some honor left in this system. I'm not convinced anymore. I'm just like
Should
I'm
be.
losing it.
There should be though. Like that's
There should
again,
be.
I like my anchor is like I'm going to set an ideal for how Congress should act, and then be perpetually disappointed that they don't do that. But my lodestar is like Justin Amash, right? Like how he wanted to conduct himself and do debate and like have Congress function as like a body for like deliberation and getting like the functions of government accomplished. Like he's an interesting guy to talk about that. He would have actually made a great House Speaker for that reason.
He would have been. He look. I think that he removed himself from that situation for the reasons that we're talking about, right? Like that he just saw it for the farce that it is, that nothing was being done, and that everyone was just running around gesticulating, like
Exactly.
So
That being said, though, we do have to call it a night. Thanks again, folks, for joining us here on A Free Solution on WYSL. We're probably going to keep talking a little bit afterwards. Appreciate y'all being here. Have a great night, folks. Take care. Yeah, Shelly says high school kids are now arrested for pulling the fire alarm now. When I was a kid, you got suspended. Same thing for a bomb threat. I take that stuff seriously. Yeah, and with some understandableness now, especially for like bomb threats. But yeah, no, if you pull a fire alarm, there's real consequences for it for some kids. And I don't know that that's right to treat a kid that way. But a full-grown adult member of Congress, yeah, man, like he knew what he was doing. Like that
guy is. He's so bad. He's such an actor, like he goes on tirades, right? Like he's one. I saw this whole clip of him having like a friendly conversation with Massey, and then a reporter shows up and he starts screaming, like gun control, guns killing, kids, blah 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 blah. It's like, look, I get that you want to make points. I get that there are things that you want to passionately advocate for, but when you're playing two cameras, like you're not a serious person. He's not a serious person. He's a popularity hound. He wants to be like whatever. It's annoying, man. They're bad people. Oh, Brian Bedford out there. My grandfather was a cross-dressing Republican. Yeah, he should be president of the United States. That'd be perfect. Like it's just
why not?
Where we're at. That's where we're at. And here's Patricia. Clowns to the left, jokers to the right, stuck in the middle. Yeah, we're kind of like, I do get this sense of we're like the same middle, and the rest of the world has lost their freaking minds. I don't know.
No, I get it. It does feel like that sometimes.
It's like, hey, a lot less government would be okay. I did want to talk about this little deal here, Kevin. I hope you don't mind. It would have been better for the show, but look, it'll get into a pragmatic libertarian issue for us. Our local community, Oneonta, New York, is applying for another community block grant, downtown development micro grant program. They've done a good job helping out people that I know, whereas I would prefer lower taxes, guys, a better parking design for downtown Oneonta. I don't care what anybody says. It's a train wreck. When they did the urban renewal back in the late 70s, early 80s, they destroyed in and out parking where you can just pull out to the side of the road, jump out, run in, grab a coffee, drive away. Like they destroyed that. It looks nice, but it's horrible. So anyway, if you have a business downtown, sign up for some money, free money from the government. You guys are probably generating sales tax. You're definitely generating economic activity. In a way, it's not even a grant, right? It's just a reclamation of your money. So that's how I see it as a libertarian.
Right.
Go for it. That's what I'm saying.
You're saying, you should take that government money wherever you can get it.
It's their money, Kevin. It's their money. These
Taking
little
back the
independent
money.
businesses generate a lot of sales tax. They look and like they have to deal with the things that I criticize about downtown Oneonta, the bad parking, the ability to appeal to a wide audience. Like it's tough, right? You're stuck in a niche there. So
Yeah,
they have a tough job. They really do.
No, I kind of tend to understand, like, I don't. Well, I think a lot of the programs that give away government money, whether it's massive corporate subsidies or even smaller grants, are probably ill-advised and distort the market. That said, if you're a business owner, it's
Yeah.
tough to survive, particularly in New York State. I get why you'd go after that. In the same way that, like, I think there are a bunch of people who tried to play gotcha with, like, the pandemic relief funds, like the PPP funds too, with small businesses. And like part of me is like, well,
Yeah.
I get why businesses would do that, because, like, as far as they're concerned, they're like, the government made us shut down. We weren't able to operate effectively. Our customers and clients weren't able to operate effectively. Like, this keeps us open.
Yeah.
Because the government, again, it's that was an absolute classic example. I mean, depending on how you think about, like, pandemic response, but a classic example to me of the government breaking your legs and offering you crutches. But
Yeah. That's what they did for sure.
and that's what a lot of, like, IDA funds end up being too, and the small business grants. Okay, we've made this environment that's incredibly difficult for you to thrive in. Here's a little something to feel grateful for us. You're welcome.
Kiss the ring for the cash I gave you.
But again, as a small business owner, I don't blame you for going after that. I get it. It's you got to do what you got to do to keep your doors open, to keep your employees, like, getting paychecks. Like,
Yeah. I mean, like I said, the government has created weird sets of challenges. They limit your rights. We're in a high tax environment that's chasing people out of our area. They screwed up the parking back decades ago. They destroyed a whole street of businesses to do this urban renewal thing. It's like, so anyway, take the money. It's going to come around again, and I wish you guys all the best of luck. Even though what I'd prefer is lower taxes, a growing economy, and a growing population in our area that's happening normally. I did see some Kim Jong Il, one of these guys, crying like, "Our Kim? Here it is, Kim." Kim Jong-un weeps as he calls on North Korean women to have more children to stem birth rate decline. It's a worldwide problem, Kevin. It's not just the United States.
He weeps. All right. Have they tried feeding the people? Just a thought. Like, if you have enough food, it's probably easier to have a few more babies. I don't know. I know, like, that's beyond the pale for a communist country, though. Like, so what do I know?
Did that start playing noise in the background? Luckily, it wasn't the radio show.
It's all right.
So they got rid of Santos, but they literally tracked the gold bars that were allegedly given by what's his name?
The Egyptians to Menendez?
Yeah, Fred Diabies. They tracked the bars. This guy had them stolen from him. So he had to like they were in police custody because the police recovered them for him. And so they have pictures of them. They have the serial numbers on the gold bars. It's just amazing. Like they have this guy this
Like,
time. He'll probably find a way to weasel out of it.
he seems to figure it out, but like, yeah, hit him too. Like, just cartoonishly like corrupt. Like,
He is.
like if we could also find him with a big overflowing sack of money too, like in giving like a thumbs up and a handshake to like a mustached character.
It
Yeah,
still
like
wouldn't
that.
be enough to get him thrown out of the Senate. Probably. It's just amazing where it's at. It's just amazing where it's at, though.
Yeah.
This guy is obviously corrupt. He's obviously skirting the system. He just barely, like I said, he just barely got away with it in the past. It was like we talked about it on a show. I feel like it was a mistrial or something like that.
Yeah.
Can't remember the specifics, but he's not a good dude.
Yeah, no. Yeah, he's been accused also of some very serious corruption issues.
Yeah, other things. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's more. But wait, there's more. Always more with that guy.
Yeah, it's a lot. So Tim, I know we were going to talk about like Venezuela possibly invading Guyana and that whole imperialism thing, but you know what? I think I'm going to call it a night. I still got to edit this thing.
Yeah, which is fine, but I just want to say that the promises of socialism that are undeliverable eventually will deteriorate into imperialism because that's just the way it is.
Does every time.
It's happened in the past. We have history to work with, but check out what Kevin's talking about. Yeah.
No, that's the thing. They're having the referendum was what today, right? I think Tuesday. And I didn't see how it all turned out, but if the government wants to do this thing, you know, Venezuela, I'm sure could find a way to win the election that it wants to win.
Well, psychopaths in power, Kevin,
Yeah,
see that war can benefit economies in it.
Yeah,
Weird and stupid ways. If you can get people moving in the same direction, that I'm not going to say that there isn't a benefit. I'm saying it's soulless, it's wrong, and it destroys wealth. You're missing the bigger picture because you're not seeing the whole thing.
I mean, Venezuela, keep in mind, is an enormous country with like just a ton of resources, and they were a rich country without having to go and steal Guyana's newfound oil reserves. Venezuela still has a crap load of oil. Like they could do great if they were just less shitty. Like that's all they like. And you know, they had problems when they had a more free market economy, but not like this.
I know. Like, how did they not
so
see
much
that?
wealthier?
And another thing we didn't get to, and maybe we'll do it next show because we should have. But cold fusion reactor, perhaps going online in Japan. I didn't have time to research it, but I got a message right before the show. So we're going to have to check into that.
Cool. Unlimited energy. Let's go.
Let's do it. God's scarcity won't allow that, Kevin.
All right. Well, anyway, we're going to call it a night, folks. Take care.
Yep. Take care, guys. Thanks.
Thanks for listening.